Okay, so consciousness is this mystery, right? This thing that's like fascinated thinkers forever, really. This idea of what makes you, like that inner world, all your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of wild. Even with all the science we have now, there's still so many missing pieces to this puzzle. So today, we're going to dive into what we do know, what we don't know, and why it even matters,
Right.
And we've got some really interesting stuff to cover, thanks to what you sent over from that hard problem, the subjective experience thing, all the way to like, could AI ever actually be conscious?
Well, and that's what makes it so challenging, right? Because we're basically trying to use like these objective tools and methods to figure out something that is totally subjective.
Yeah.
We can map all this brain activity, but how do you explain like the feeling of pure joy or the taste of chocolate?
Exactly. Like, how do we get from neurons firing to like this whole rich world of experience?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It really is. It's almost like we're trying to study a ghost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We know it's there, but how do you actually grab onto it? So before we go any further, let's just get this out of the way. How do we actually define consciousness?
Well, you could say that at its core, consciousness is about awareness. Awareness of yourself, awareness of what's around you. It's about like reacting to things, making choices, even having a sense of self. But that hard problem, you mentioned it, that's about explaining how that subjective experience, that inner world, how does that actually come from stuff happening in the brain physically?
It's kind of like the difference between seeing a recipe for a cake and actually eating it.
Right.
You see all the ingredients, the steps, but that doesn't tell you what it tastes like, the texture, the whole experience.
Exactly.
So where does science fit into all of this? What are we actually learning about the brain and consciousness?
Well, science has made some incredible progress, especially when you look at brain mapping. Techniques like fMRI, they're amazing. We can actually see how different parts of the brain light up when you're doing certain mental tasks.
Oh, wow.
Like if you're solving a problem or remembering something from your childhood.
That's incredible.
Imagine you're looking at an fMRI scan of someone listening to their favorite song. Right.
Okay.
You see activity not just in the part that processes sound, but also in areas tied to emotion, memory.
Oh, interesting.
It shows how interconnected everything is, but, and this is a big but, it still doesn't tell us how that person actually experiences the music.
So we're kind of getting closer to the mechanics, but that essence, that feeling, is still a mystery.
It is, for now.
And that makes me think about this whole debate around AI becoming conscious. We have AI that can write poems, hold conversations. It's mind-blowing. But is that really consciousness? Or is it just, really, really good programming?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Some experts say true consciousness, it needs that subjective experience. And we just don't see evidence of that in AI. They're processing information incredibly fast, but there's no sign that they actually feel anything. It's more like they're mimicking human behavior based on all this data they've been trained on.
So feeling versus processing, that's the big difference.
It is, at least for now.
But it makes you wonder, where do animals fit in with all this? I mean, you see some animals do some pretty complex stuff.
Absolutely. Take mirror self-recognition. We've seen it in dolphins, elephants, some birds even.
Really?
They seem to understand that what they see in the mirror is them. And then there are things like elephants, apparently mourning their dead, or crows using tools.
Wow.
Scientists are looking at these behaviors for clues about, like, how self-aware these animals are, what kind of internal experience they might have.
It really makes you question what it means to be conscious, doesn't it?
It does.
And, thinking about all this, it's like, our understanding of consciousness, it's also influenced by our culture, don't you think? We've been talking about the individual mind, but what if consciousness goes beyond that? What if it's more than just us on our own? Now, that's where things get really interesting, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Western philosophical tradition, it's always been big on the individual. Consciousness is seen as something your mind does on its own, like Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. But then you look at Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism, the focus is on interconnectedness, the individual self. Maybe that's an illusion.
So just the way we think about consciousness is shaped by where we come from.
It is.
It's pretty amazing that something so fundamental can be seen in such different ways.
It really shows how complex consciousness is. And it reminds us there are many ways to understand it. It's not just about scientific data, it's about philosophy, cultural perspectives, and personal experience, too.
So we need all these different views to get the full picture.
We do.
So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for us figuring out consciousness? I mean, there are breakthroughs happening in neuroscience, technology, even psychedelics are being explored. It's like a tool to understand the mind.
And the really interesting thing is that these fields are starting to like overlap, in ways we never would have thought of before. We're talking about things like mapping the neural correlates of consciousness, basically trying to figure out which exact brain activity patterns match up with specific conscious experiences.
That's wild.
Yeah, and we're also developing technologies that could like enhance or even alter consciousness.
That's pretty crazy.
And then, of course, there's psychedelics, which people are studying because they can, like, really change your conscious state and maybe give us insights into how we perceive things, the nature of the self.
Yeah, I was reading about this study where they gave psilocybin to people who meditate a lot, and then they used fMRI to look at their brains.
Oh, interesting.
They said they felt this sense of unity, like being connected to everything. And the scans showed less activity in areas of the brain that are linked to the sense of self.
That makes sense.
It's like, wow, could psychedelics help us figure out these altered states of consciousness?
Yeah.
And maybe even tell us more about what consciousness is in general.
It's a growing area of research, for sure. But even as we explore this cutting-edge stuff, we shouldn't forget about those wisdom traditions,
Huh.
The ones that have been thinking about consciousness for centuries.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I was actually thinking about the concept of a collective consciousness, this idea that we're all linked on some deeper level. It comes up in a lot of spiritual traditions, right?
Absolutely. And it might sound a little out there, but there are some really interesting connections popping up between ancient wisdom and modern science, like interconnectedness, for example.
Yeah.
Think about quantum entanglement, this idea that particles can be linked in ways that, like, break the rules of physics as we know them.
Right.
It's almost like there's this hidden web connecting everything beneath the surface of reality.
So you've got these ancient traditions talking about interconnectedness, and now we're seeing hints of it in physics. It kind of makes you wonder if there's more to consciousness than we realize. Maybe it's more like a field, something that extends beyond our individual brains.
That's a fascinating possibility. And it leads to some big questions, If consciousness is bigger than we thought, what does that mean for how we understand ourselves, our relationships, even our place in the universe?
It's like we're going from this individualistic view of consciousness, everyone's isolated, to a more connected, expansive view. And if that's true, it's got to change how we think about everything, right?
Absolutely. It challenges all these ideas about where the self ends, the nature of reality. It even brings up ethical questions about, like, our responsibility to each other and to the planet.
That's what I find so interesting about all of this. It's not just about scientific facts. It's about meaning, ethics, our place in the cosmos.
Exactly. It forces us to really wrestle with the big questions. Who are we? What are we here for? How do we relate to each other and to the world around us?
And as we learn more about consciousness, these questions are going to become even more important. Think about the ethical implications of technology that could, actually change consciousness.
That's a huge point. If we figure out how to manipulate consciousness, who decides how it's used? Could it be used for healing, for, expanding human potential? Or could it become a tool for control, for manipulation? We need to start talking about this now before it becomes a reality.
Yeah, it's like something out of science fiction, erasing memories, implanting thoughts, even creating completely new experiences. It's both exciting and kind of terrifying.
It really is a double-edged sword, and it shows how important it is to be responsible and humble as we research consciousness. We're dealing with something incredibly powerful, incredibly complex. We need to be careful.
It's like opening a door to a whole new world, where the boundaries of the mind are getting blurry. And it makes you wonder, are we really ready for what's on the other side?
That's the challenge, isn't it? We need to have these conversations now, think critically about what consciousness research could mean, and make sure it's used to benefit humanity and the planet.
It's hard not to just be in awe of all this. We've learned so much about the brain, but the essence of consciousness, that subjective experience, it still feels so mysterious.
And that's what keeps it so fascinating. It's a journey, a scientific and personal one. It's about understanding not just how the brain works, but what it means to be human, to experience the world with all its beauty and complexity.
I love that. It reminds us that even as we push the boundaries of what we know, we shouldn't forget about the wonder, the mystery at the heart of it all.
Absolutely. It's a journey we're all on together. Scientists, philosophers, spiritual seekers, everyone who's ever wondered about what it means to exist.
And as we keep exploring, it's good to remember that the journey itself is as important as where we end up. It's about asking big questions, challenging what we think we know, and becoming more aware of what it means to be conscious beings in this vast, interconnected universe.
Yeah, it's like we're putting together this giant cosmic puzzle, and we're starting to see these little glimpses of a bigger picture, a picture that's way more connected than we first thought.
And it's not like a still picture either, is it? It's always changing as we find more pieces, as we understand more. But, you know, with all this exploring, I keep coming back to this basic question. If consciousness is more than what's going on in our brains, what else could it be?
That's a tough one. Philosophers and scientists have been wrestling with that for ages. Some say consciousness is just a basic property of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism.
Hmm.
Others think maybe it comes from how information interacts in complex systems, like whether it's biological or, artificial. It's the kind of question that makes us rethink everything we know and consider some possibilities that might seem pretty radical or even, mystical.
It is kind of mind-blowing, isn't it, to think that this thing we experience so directly, being aware, thinking, feeling, could be connected to something way bigger than us, something that's like woven into the fabric of reality.
It is, and the implications are pretty huge. If consciousness is this fundamental part of the universe, then our whole view of our place in it changes. We're not just these isolated things on a lonely planet. We're part of this massive, interconnected web of consciousness.
It's a beautiful thought, really.
Oh,
And it's humbling. It makes you wonder, what does this mean for the future of humanity? If we really embrace this expanded view of consciousness, could it lead to a more compassionate, more connected world?
I think it could. By recognizing that we're all connected, we naturally develop more empathy, more responsibility for each other, for all living things, really. It could change how we relate to each other, how we treat the planet, how we face the big challenges.
Imagine a world where that connection wasn't just an idea, but something we really felt, something that guided our choices, our actions, our whole way of being.
That would be a profound shift, wouldn't it? And we might be a long way from that. But just thinking about these possibilities opens up new ways to grow, to evolve.
It's like we're at the start of a new chapter in the human story, a chapter where we're beginning to see what consciousness really is and how it might change our world. And I have a feeling this chapter is going to be full of both amazing things and tough challenges as we navigate all this uncharted territory.
It will, but that's what makes it so exciting, right? Embracing the unknown, asking the hard questions, staying open to things that might change everything we thought we knew.
So well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key things you'd want our listener to remember about consciousness?
Well, first of all, remember that it's still a mystery, one that keeps us fascinated and makes us really think. It's not just about the brain doing its thing. It's about this whole realm of subjective experience that we're just starting to understand. And to really get a handle on it, we need to look at it from all angles: science, philosophy, even spiritual traditions.
Right.
And as we learn more, we've got to remember the ethical side of things, making sure that our pursuit of knowledge helps humanity, helps the planet, not the other way around.
I think those are some really important points. And for our listener, as you keep exploring consciousness on your own, remember you're part of this huge interconnected web of people asking these questions. Keep asking, keep challenging what you think you know, and hold on to that sense of wonder. Who knows what we'll discover as we dive deeper into this amazing thing we call consciousness.
It's just the beginning, and the possibilities are endless.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's made you curious and inspired you to keep exploring this fascinating world of consciousness. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that sense of wonder alive.